So welcome everyone. This is the post group for Ithaca and Syracuse, SUP and Park Post, but we have a special guest tonight. So Milton Santiago is moderating tonight, and he brought in our guest, and I will let Milton introduce.
Thank you, Shayna. I got a little thing that I wrote, just keep my thoughts organized.
I always look forward to learning about me.
Like this.
I'm very excited. I don't know what the answer is.
Here we go. Development, pre-production, production, post-production. For over 100 years, these have been the phases of production for filmmaking, television, commercials, corporate, you name it, right? That's basically the order in which we've put together creative storytelling, and it's worked well, but it hasn't been perfect. Despite the fact that we're able to get to the finish line, for the most part, these processes create an environment where creatives are sometimes siloed from each other, and the exchange of ideas between creatives can fail if not for the presence of a communicative producer or director. Most of us that have worked professionally know how unpleasant an experience it can be to be on a production where the communication doesn't flow. But a lot of times the process itself is the barrier to success. So imagine a world, a new kind of storytelling where those types of barriers start to disappear. Imagine a style of storytelling that puts creative collaboration sort of at the center of the process. This while enhancing our opportunities to break through in new ways of storytelling, while at the same time creating sort of engaging and energetic new ways to interact with our audience. Enter virtual production. Now, Disney's Mandalorian by far is probably the most highest profile case study of virtual production, but it's certainly not the only case study that's out there. So tonight, I'd like to introduce Stephen Calcote, who's an award-winning writer, producer, director, and co-founder of Butcherbird Studios in sunny Los Angeles, California. Butcherbird is a tech-forward creative production house that's worked with brands as large as National Geographic, Airbnb, ILM, and Boeing. Stephen is also the creative force behind Orbital Redux, which is the world's first, let's see if I get this right, real-time, interactive, live streaming sci-fi drama. I got to see Stephen do a presentation earlier this year in LA at the annual Cinegear conference that happens every year. And I was so captivated by what he had to share that I just simply could not resist inviting him to come to this space and share how he's leveraging virtual production and how he thinks that storytelling is being sort of reinvented through these new tools. So with that, I turn it over to Stephen.
Milton, thanks for a great introduction. And it is so exciting to be here with all of you. I am going to talk at the very end of the show about a superpower that those of you on this call have that people in Hollywood right now do not. So at the end of the show, we'll talk about your superpower and some suggestions on what you can do with it. And of course, with great power comes great responsibility. Yes, sorry, Spider-Man fans. All right, so let's get started with a few questions because I'd like to know who you are out there in the audience. How many of you have production background? How many of you have actually shot something on a camera before? Great, thank you for those of you who are on video. And The thing is, if you didn't raise your hand, I would ask you to actually give yourself credit for if you've shot on a phone before. You may have seen Catherine Bigelow with the iPhone 13, and her mini drama is that she personally talked about the dawn of the age of the cell phone video as being a cinematic experience. So one of the things that we do when we talk about production that's so exciting now that wasn't true when I was going through school is the camera in your pocket is more powerful than anything I had access to when I was in school. And that is not that long ago. And so that is one of the advantages you have that's really new. And in fact, if you have a compelling story and you shoot it with that phone and the content is really cool, there's a good chance that it'll rise to the top. A couple of other questions just to calibrate. How many of you have actually seen The Mandalorian? Raise your hand in some form or fashion. Okay, so we've got a few folks here. I know most of us have heard about The Mandalorian right now, the story of the origin of Boba Fett, his people, and that whole Star Wars universe being very much done with giant screens. And the reason, this is the link, the reason that we are doing the production talk that we're doing right now is because The Mandalorian is just one story in terms of virtual production. And the most exciting part of virtual production, which will be a part of production for you if you decide to go into film and television, is that the most exciting things happening there in virtual production today are actually much more accessible to the independent filmmaker. All right, last question, because I'm just curious, how many of you watch Twitch in some way, form, or another? Okay. How many of you stream on Twitch? Any streamers out there? Okay, Caitlin, I see you. That is awesome. And I give you massive points for that because that puts you at the vanguard of a new type of performer. And it gives you an experience that is absolutely the wave of the future. And if you don't know Caitlin, she has a unique experience that a lot of you would do well to learn from. It doesn't matter how many streamers you have watching you in return. The fact that she has taken that time and done that work, she now has a skill set, which frankly is very exciting here in Hollywood. And a lot of people are bringing streamers right out of school and working with them directly. All right, enough of the polls. It's good to know a little bit of the audience. Thank you for that. I'm now going to share my screen and I am going to give you a look at the keynote. All right, so according to my screen, I am officially sharing with you right now. Can I get a thumbs up that everybody can see that right now? Thank you so much. All right, so the official name of our talk today is Going Live with Virtual Production. I am going to give you some background here. I'm going to hopefully give you an insight and a little bit of inspiration on why this is an important topic right now and how you can get involved. But I'm definitely going to leave time at the end for questions. I will keep the chat open, and I do have that out of the corner of my eye. So if you have a burning question that you don't want to wait until the end, I'll try to pick it up in real time. So with no further ado, Going Live with Virtual Production, tools and tricks for real-time storytelling. And I just want to say here at the start, thank you so much to Milton and Shana and the Syracuse University Newhouse School of Public Communications. It's a real honor to be sharing this with you. All right, let's get into it. This is probably the most important thing that I can tell you in terms of your relationship with virtual production as a technology. It is not just a technology, it's a mindset. Virtual production is not just a technology, it's a mindset. And actually, there are other technologies like this, but the creativity with which you apply virtual production is going to be just as important as the technology itself. And we'll come back to this, we'll expand on it, but I wanted to start with that bold statement. Now, in this photo, which is a still from the interactive science fiction piece that Milton mentioned, there is a zero-G fire going on in the airlock behind our star, Tommy. Now, that zero-G fire, I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into, that is actually a virtual production element. And that was done in real time live, because that's the thing with live. You don't have time to do visual effects at the end. I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but I just wanted to give you an insight about some of the things we'll be defining. Now, I should probably just define for those of you who aren't a virtual production geek yet, what exactly it is. And in essence, virtual production is the integration of real-time compositing with filmmaking. And that is true whether you're using the latest, most famous tools from Unreal Engine, which everyone sees in the headlines every other day, or if you're playing back video content within a scene. Anything that is this display-based technology that will result in final pixels integrated with your real-time production, that is virtual production. And I've intentionally defined it in a very wide way because LED screens have taken the spotlight. And in fact, this is not all of the story. Oh, I forgot to mention something. You were promised my co-creator, Lillian Diaz-Prisbal, and I wanted to let you know that she sends her very best. She was my showrunner on Orbital Redux, a co-creator. We do everything together. She's actually on the sound stage right behind me on a big show right now directing. I got put onto an assignment 24 hours ago as she did, and we had to scramble a bit. So anyway, she sends her best. You'll see her photo at the end. She's here in spirit. All right. Now, we've been talking about giant screens. You may have seen The Mandalorian, and that is a sound stage which is 25 feet high, and it's 50-foot long walls filled with LED screens. Millions and millions of dollars. That's exactly right, Brad. Westworld has also integrated some similar volumes, we call them, where if you remember in last season, there is a moment where there is a really clear airship that's going through the city at night, and you see through the glass the city. That was done in capture volume. And one of the earliest examples is the movie Gravity. Those were very early LED walls. But this has kind of taken the air out of the room a little bit, because the really exciting thing for me is all the ways that virtual production is not those LED screens. Now, not everyone will give credit to the original rear screen as virtual production, but Lillian and I really want to encourage you, because of the resources you have access to think about the other screens that matter. Now, the thing that is often piping out the content is the real-time game engine, Unreal Engine. Fortnite, you may have, if you don't know Unreal Engine, you've probably heard of Fortnite. You have a brother or sister who plays many hours of Fortnite. Well, Unreal Engine is the game engine behind that. The great little secret is once Unreal Engine was given free to creators like me, it exploded with cinematic possibilities. But Unreal Engine doesn't just have to supply giant multi-million-dollar LED screens. Way back in 1945, as one example among many, you see Detour in the upper right there. That rear screen was a film projector projecting onto the screen behind them, and then they had a camera in front of them. That resulted in final pixels. That was not a blue screen effect. They finished filming and they were driving through the city streets. It looks a little cheesy today, but that kind of technique was revolutionary at the time. On the lower left, you see Orbital Redux. That is not an LED screen. That is a 4K short throw projector rather than a 100 or 200 or 500,000 LED wall in terms of money. That was a $5,000 Dell short throw 4K projector. 8 inches away from the wall, it could create a 50-inch wide surface. So in our live screen environment, we were able to beam 4K images that, again, Tommy, our actress, was able to look through the porthole and see this incredible world out there. And because it was done at a larger width and height than that window, as we moved across it with the camera, it felt like you were looking onto a world out there. And then finally, here's a dirty little secret that a lot of people aren't writing about. Green screen is just as important as it always was. And it's one of the cheapest ways that we can achieve visual effects. What Unreal Engine and virtual production has allowed us to do, though, is we can now do real-time background replacement with that green screen. And if you look really closely, if you see my cursor here, if you look at the little camera monitor that the camera operator is looking at, there is a virtual set being added in real time. Again, we hit cut, we yell cut, and the show is done. It's already composited. We'll open up these thoughts a little bit more, but again, this is the big premise for this discussion is other screens still matter. All right. We talk a lot about technology, and you heard that Butcherbird is a technology-driven storytelling company. But the first thing that we say, especially to folks just getting started, folks just like you, is that before we talk tech, we have to go all the way to the beginning. We have to talk about what your mission is. And then right after we talk mission, we have to talk story. And in fact, if you see in this little diagram here with everything flowing into everything else, technology is at the end of the chain. Because as much as I'm a geek and my friends and colleagues here love playing with a lot of technology, viewers don't tune in to watch technology. They just don't. They tuned into Star Wars to see a story about a young boy who had a chance to get off his desert planet and eventually to save the universe. They watch a story about a young girl who was in an orphanage and learns how to play chess and changes her life because of it. They watch a group of people who were pulled out of disparate lifestyles and put into a giant stage where they had to compete with each other to survive in a Squid Game. Again and again, if you think about how people talk to you about shows that they love, they very rarely talk about technology. Very, very rarely. So this could be a whole masterclass in itself, and everyone here is still learning this. But the first thing that we ask if a client comes to us and they want to tell the story about a brand new technology product that they're offering to the world, or if we're talking about a sci-fi adventure, we always ask, well, what's our goal here? What's our goal? With Orbital Redux, our goal was to, as a studio, put our group on the map by doing something completely different. And then from there, we talked about, well, what is the story we can create that we're really excited about? And so if we're working with our clients at Twitch and Amazon, and they come to us with a car spot. So next week, I'm directing a car spot for Twitch. And one of our challenges is we're not just going to do a car commercial. Because those of you who've watched Twitch, this is about real people just like you and me who are communicating to other real people just like you and me. So if we're going to feature a car in a sponsored integration, we have to ask what kind of story is appropriate for that. It has to feel really natural. So we're going to come up with this really cool story that fits into that particular streamer's world. When we're working with audiences or we're working on originals, we also have to talk about audience. Now that we have a story in this multi-platform world, there are hundreds of different audiences out there. If you are somebody that loves games, there's a high chance you know about Twitch and are a part of that. So if we have a story that has a gaming component, Twitch has got to be our first stop. And that's where that audience lives, Twitch, which brings us to platform. Once we start talking about platform, we ask, what are the unique capabilities of that platform and how will we support them? And then all the way at the end of this chain is technology. Now that we know where we're going to be, what technology will this integration support? If we're on Twitch, we only have a lot of ways to interact with users. If we're going to do a live Facebook show or a live YouTube show, we know that we have less interactivity, but maybe we have more reach to our particular audience. And in each of these cases, as we talk about how to get to that platform, we ask the technology question finally of, given the budget, given our story, our audience, and our platform, what's the most effective way to tell this story? You know, we think about this a lot. Even if Star Wars had not been a gigantic story that took place across planets and galaxies, but it had took place in a single neighborhood, and you still had all the same characters in this single neighborhood fighting for something they believed in, it still would have been a fantastic film. Actually, if you haven't seen it, I think I just described Attack the Block, which is a great monster film that takes place in the mean streets of London and has some great work in it. So Attack the Block, if you haven't seen it, I recommend checking it out. All right, let's get into more virtual production. So let me ask this. Why would you stream virtual production live? And that's actually, it's a definite perspective we have here. We're not just talking about virtual production. We're talking about often shooting it with 3 cameras or more. In the case of Orbital Redux, we had 10 cameras. The show that's shooting right now on the stage has 3 cameras going behind me. Why would you want to do that live? It's already hard enough to do virtual production. It's already hard enough to live stream. So why combine the two? And this is the particular perspective we're offering here. Interactivity, and this is one. Interactivity, platforms have done the heavy lifting of creating interactive tools. So you want to take advantage of that. Twitch, I will, even though they're a client, I would also, even if they weren't a client, I would say, if you want to see where the most cutting edge interactive work is being done with audiences, you got to spend some time on Twitch. From heat maps and overlays to tug of war, voting extensions, it's a little glimpse into the future about how we can bring the audience into the story in really new ways. Number two, we like to do this live because we like audiences just like you to be part of our story. I've spent a lifetime learning how to do narrative, how to tell a story, and I'll spend the rest of my life doing that same thing, hopefully getting better and better at it. But wow, nothing compares to adding the audience in real time and pivoting and adjusting the story based on their desires. So I offer to you this question. If you're on the creative side, take the story you want to tell and ask this question. What happens if I got the audience involved with this story in real time? Doesn't matter if it's a commercial production, doesn't matter if it's a narrative production. It's going to take you in really interesting places. Finally, no embarrassment here. It's exhilarating to do live. It's exhilarating to put yourself out on the edge as an actor or a creator, or in my case, a director, to try to create a story that's compelling and brings the audience in and makes them feel like that they're a part of it. So everything we're talking about can apply to just doing a single camera production and recording it and then sending it out to the world later. But we're going to talk about live and see where that takes you. All right. I won't belabor this because this is not a technical or engineering discussion. When we do a 3-camera show so that you have a little bit of a baseline, there's a lot of technology involved. But I want to set you at ease. Unreal Engine is built where if you have an iPhone, you can still do very interesting things with it. If you have a green screen and a simple camera, you can still do interesting things with it. If you have multi-million dollars and you can throw all the technology you want, you can do really amazing things. Here's one way that we attack it. So you've got 3 Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pros up there at the top, camera A, B, and C, if you see my cursor bouncing around there. We all send it through a router, and then we have a device called an Ultimat, which helps to, as a hardware device, create these really clean green screen images. We have a dedicated Unreal Engine computer for each of the cameras that is running the same scene and then real-time compositing that scene with the camera image. We are recording all of the camera feeds so that we could combine it in new ways later. And then there's a lot of stuff going over here to the right where we record things and send them to editors in real time. And yeah, Brad, I have to give Michael Henderson credit here for the very spectacular villain names. It makes it easy to remember these PCs with Voorhees, Kruger, and Myers. All right, enough of the techie geek stuff. Let's get back into the content. All right. Oh, I did forget to mention one thing. You'll hear about tracking. All I'm going to say about it is, why is tracking important? It's because you can, if you track something, you can tell Unreal Engine where it is in space. If we track our cameras and we move the camera, then Unreal Engine knows in real time to shift the background behind you accordingly. There are ways to do this for $25,000 a camera, which is the MOSIS solution. And there are ways to do it for $100 a camera, which is the Vive solution. That's the same Vive tracker, which is 100 or 150 bucks from the VR world. So again, I'm just giving you a taste of, if you're a little bit uncertain, ooh, Unreal, can I ever afford playing with this? Yeah, absolutely, because there are lots of ways to attack it. How did we start? We're a bootstrapped organization, meaning that none of us had silver spoons when we showed up in Hollywood. And if you do have a silver spoon, wow, we have some productions that you should support. So if you don't have a silver spoon though, and you are bootstrapping and you have to grow organically, you're going to do what we did. When we could afford a few years ago just the Vive trackers, that's how we designed our system. And then as we got more and more shows, we've slowly but surely begun to upgrade to the MOSIS star tracking system. We encourage you to think the same way. You'll hear that throughout this entire talk. We're always talking about learning to walk before you run, right? All right, now we're going to get into some examples. So we've been really fortunate here to have some amazing clients, from Apple to Netflix to Amazon, clients who require an execution at an insanely high level. You may wonder, well, how on earth did you get that opportunity? Well, we did the first thing, and this was a few years ago, and we made a name for ourselves. And with each one, we got to more and more complicated, and we kept delivering. And now we're an easy answer. If you need a great show done, they can come to us and they know, okay, we're going to deliver it on time, on budget. It's going to look great. It's going to sound great. It's going to involve the audience. So that's just a little note of, again, this is all walk and then run. Netflix. How many of you like to watch Netflix out there? All right, so here's one of the challenges for Netflix. Actually, I'm going to throw it out, and I am going to ask first answer. So let me just take a moment, make sure you guys are still awake out there. What is one of Netflix's biggest challenges for audiences? So one of the largest content makers on the planet, what is one of the biggest challenges that Netflix has when it comes to audiences, given that they make so much content? Just throw your thought right into the chat. Claudia, you nailed it. What we call in the business, suggesting what to watch, Claudia, we also call discovery. Discovery in the infinite channel environment we have right now is the single biggest challenge for any content maker. So Netflix came to us with this really interesting challenge. Genre shows, which we all love here and consume when we're finally off duty. The first thing we do after filming all day is go home and watch something really cool on TV. That's kind of the sickness that we all have. It's a good sickness to have. So Netflix was, in this fall, they had 50 new shows to talk about. They were all genre shows. And so the question is, how do you make something cool that people are going to want to watch where you make announcements about all 50 shows? So we came up with a week-long worth of programming. And for each of the 50 shows, we did something really different. So for the Lucifer cast, we had the current cast go back and reread the first pilot script as a cast reading and then switch roles at the end. For the Shadow and Bone show, we got Milo the Goat, and we had Milo the Goat answer questions by randomly picking different bowls of food that either said yes or no. We did wacky little executions that would be entertaining about each show and give people a reason to watch. Why is this a virtual production story? Well, with 50 different shows between two different versions of this, the To Doom, Watch Party, and Geek Week, it becomes really difficult to change your set fast enough to make it feel special across a week of broadcasting for each of the shows. And that's where virtual production came in. So here are these stills, and each of these stills is a custom version for each of the shows that they're talking about. And each of the three cameras, when I do this, if you're not familiar, when I do this, I'm actually saying, where is the camera pointing? So I'm saying I've got two cameras pointing towards the talent on this side and then one camera in the center. We are constantly updating the background to make a really vibrant, dynamic, on-brand background. And we're changing those in real time. So here's how that looks like. Let me bring it to life. None of the videos we're showing today have sound. I'm going to talk through them. So don't adjust your speaker. All right, so this is really subtle. You might just think that's a still behind them, but actually it's a dynamic moving screen that we change for the show each day. And it's optically accurate as we switch cameras for each of the guests. We've created a surround cove behind them that's updated per show. And you'll notice as the camera moves, so too does the background. That is Unreal Engine at work. And this may seem subtle and simple, but this was something that was only available 5 years ago to CNN, BBC, the largest broadcasters. To Doom, which was a different version of the show, we had a really pretty CG background. And again, as we move from actor to actor, and as we zoom in there, you see the background change in real time. I should note something here. Because the show is very cheeky during this segment on The Witcher, our green screen set assistants weren't keying out properly. And we decided to leave them in because it was so ridiculous how they would float things through. And the joke was that they thought they were invisible, but they weren't actually invisible. It was funny at the time, trust me. Anyway, let me dance through with this real quickly because it's subtle. So the center camera sees this scene. Now with Mari, if you were to curve the camera around, you should see more of this orange background behind her, which is exactly what it does. Now, if we go to Rahul, we should see kicked around more of the background behind him over what would be his right shoulder. And as we go to Rahul, you see, in fact, this is all one world that we're placing cameras in. It becomes even more obvious when we go to this set. So here is the center angle. And now if we go to the gentleman on your screen right, and we dig in on his close-up, look how the subtle shift in the background. We didn't have to come up with and place that work exactly in computer graphics and try to figure out how it'd be optically correct. All we did is we said, Unreal, here's our stage, here's where the cameras are. You do the hard work of telling us exactly what the background should look like. And because we were live, this was all done in real time. And the other nice thing is we're with the Moses Star Tracker system, we're also tracking where the zoom is on the camera and the iris as well as the focus. So this doesn't seem like anything special until you realize Unreal Engine is calculating in real time how the background should change. And do keep in mind that everything but the chair and the stools are a green screen. So the tiles in the background, the lights, the geeks, logos, those are all green screen. In the past, if a studio our size, which is an independent studio, wanted to do this, we would have had to build independent sets. We would have had to do this to where we couldn't do it live. We would have to composite things, and the show would have to be something we put together over the course of weeks. This was all done real time, day by day. Let's keep going for some more examples. Completely different side of the equation. This is a robotics company that specializes in aerial robots, ground robots, sea robots, air robots. And this story is about a bomb and hazardous materials disposal robot with the company Telerob. Now, that is not a giant company. They're a big company, but they're not a giant company who could afford a 50,000 square foot studio like this. During the pandemic, they really wanted to tell the story of this brand new bomb disposal robot, and they weren't able to actually get out to the press. So what we did is we took a pre-existing model, and this is so exciting. This model would have cost us $100,000 to make from scratch. We actually modified a free studio supplied by Unreal Engine and then branded it for the client. And the end result is we were able to give them a show that made it feel like a really large production. We were able to filter in content, which was video playback, as if they were doing their own news show. And they were able to have an international press conference, which made it feel like they'd done this giant broadcast, and it immediately set their stature at a level that they felt really matched the capabilities of their product. Sending this bomb disposal robot into harm's way in a really tough place, that's a great idea. And we were able to tell it in a way that we wouldn't have been able to normally. So one thing that's interesting here, again, the only real things that exist are the people in the front, and the robot was the real robot. All of this stuff here is a set extension that we were doing in real time. As it lands on Wahid, the CEO, that track is all being done in real time. And then you start to get really fancy. This was a virtual television that we were feeding video playback into. These are all functions that are available inside of Unreal Engine, and an independent studio like ours was able to take advantage of it and do something really special. This demonstration, LA Sheriff's Department detective who specializes in bomb disposal. Scary, cool, really exciting stuff. He was able to really tell his story in that same environment. And we were able to actually switch the set just a little bit to make it fit for his world. Didn't build a new set, just moved the camera a little bit differently in Unreal. All right, so now something a little fun. This is from our colleague Travis Stevens and writer Louis Reyes. Because we've been doing so many fun projects with Twitch, we proposed something a little different. We said, what if we did something narratively? What if we did something that got streamers involved as if they were in a real-time horror show? And this, as far as we know, had never been done before. We call the genre slow horror. And the three shows, the three pieces were done at October, Halloween, which you might think, Thanksgiving, and then again at New Year's. And it became this trilogy. Each stream was 3 to 5 hours long. And it started with a streamer that everybody knows, like Cup of Noodle. And the premise was that the streamers had landed at a haunted house where they were doing their stream, and then things started to happen. So to give you a little bit of a preview here, every single one of these windows has a regular LED TV behind it, much like you would find in a conference room at different places around Syracuse. That same TV can be built into a set, and this isn't an LED wall, it's a TV, where again, we're putting images from Unreal Engine into. So the little in motion here that I wanted to show you. So this is Cup of Noodle. At this point in the story, she has said, something's wrong here. This place is haunted. And all of a sudden we see it's a little bit not quite photoreal. We're having fun with it. The portal to another dimension, the demonic fire, we ended up adding again into these virtual elements. This is the sequel. And what looks like a nighttime forest scene. You see again the demonic possession. This is all being done live, improv. Now, at first wash, it might seem a little silly. It might seem like, wait, why would you do that? What's the advantage of integrating these tools? Well, I'll tell you, and this type of thing, by the way, is very much what you're going to find that you at Syracuse may have access to. You may have access to a set not unlike this at your college television station or your film studios, where you may have 2 walls and you want to put a window into it. This wall here is a single 50-inch TV. I'm actually putting my cursor over the window to the left here. That's a single 50-inch TV turned vertically. And I should mention, actually, this was not done with Unreal. This was done with Rehearsal, which is something that's a lot of colleges use to, in music events, to send images out to multiple monitors. We use the same technology here, and this is simply a monitor put on the back of this window. This is actually not Unreal in real time. This is just doing playback to the monitors because we wanted to tell the story of an environment that maybe was nighttime or located somewhere a little bit differently. We wanted this same house to be able to play for a lot of different drama. So why would you use this virtual production mentality? Because it gave us more possibilities. And the fact that it was a little bit of a schmaltzy horror piece that we were having fun with meant that we could push the limits and be not quite photorealistic. So those are a couple of quick thoughts there. All right. My baby and Lillian's baby, Orbital Redux. This is the live science fiction show. I want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to go pretty fast here through our final slides. But just to give you a taste of something different, we did this 3 years ago. And I will tell you, even though we did this live, we did a lot of tricks, we would use Unreal Engine and live tracking to bring the show even more to life. And now that we're talking about seasons 2 through 5, we're absolutely talking about how Unreal Engine could really bring these space stories and extend them for future seasons. So here's a little bit about Orbital Redux. So we designed this ship as a 360-degree set. In our show, that was a 4K projection screen, but if we'd made it an LED wall that curved around to the front, we could have actually followed our actress all the way around and told a bigger story. We were really limited to telling the story through this one window. But if we'd been able to extend that wall around, we would have followed the actors more around with them. So actually, I stopped that too soon. Hold on 1 second. Picking it back up again. So in this story where they're both, it's a bottle story, they're both in the spaceship together. I'm trying to use editorial keys for any of you who are editors, and Keynote does not allow editorial keys. So hold on 1 second. Okay, now we're going. All right, so that is one of the oldest technologies around. That could have been an LED wall. We actually had hundreds of needle holes and a giant light source and fiber optics behind this star field. So of course, if we had an LED wall here, we would have actually changed that entire front view of the ship in real time. So we were very proud of some of the techniques we used, but we're the first to recognize that virtual production would have allowed us to extend the story even more. Because think about it, everyone on the call now, imagine if your audience could decide what planet you're going to land on. And imagine if your audience could select the color. Is it a gas giant? Is it a rocky asteroid? And what if you could pivot the story right then? So as soon as you start to take your brain there, you think, that's why we want to do something with virtual production. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pop to the end here. At one point, they go into a flat spin. And this is where the entire ship is spinning around really, really fast. And as a director, I couldn't look out the front window because we didn't have a screen that large. So I used a technocrane to spin around with them. But at this point, as they're desperately trying to fight the higher gravity created with the centrifugal force, at this point, I will be the first to tell you that I would have loved to just move that camera a little bit up and to the left and to see the world spinning around them in an LED screen. And that's where I would have put that. And then I'll end on the simplest virtual production of it all. So at this point, this is all live. The audience has decided that there's going to be a fire in the airlock. The actress did not get informed of that until it happened. And so you can imagine the extraordinary situation of Yasmin, who's playing Tommy here, is trying to find out how the ship is broken down. This is probably the simplest virtual production technique in the whole book. This was actually not Unreal Engine. This was a playback file. We actually shot the airlock and did the clean plate of the airlock. And then we composited fire onto it. We slowed down the fire. And then without making a big deal about it, we replaced that view of the airlock and back to TV right up to the edge of the window. And then that just looked like a normal airlock until the whole episode was almost done. And then we hit playback and boom, the fire exploded and had interactive lighting there. That's all. That one little window there is all from a single LED monitor that we just did a simple playback on. And you can see that is not even a big monitor. That's, I think, a 32-inch monitor. And this is my challenge to all of you. If you're in production and you're thinking about stories, what if you added a single window? What if you added a single window with a small TV behind it? What if you could make that view at that point onto any world? And if you don't have Unreal Engine, you're not interested in that, you have at least a computer that could do a playback file. So anyway, that is what I would love to leave you with thinking-wise, as far as like where you might get started, even if you don't want to do Unreal. All right, let me finish up here. Again, any one of these moments we could talk for hours about, and we do here. What's next? It's a really exciting time. Pretty much anything you can imagine doing in production is happening in Unreal Engine right now. And this, if you're a Unity fan, you could do this in Unity too. But real-time game engines mean that we can do real-time tracking of people in motion capture suits and have real-time puppeting of CG humans. We can do real-time background updates. We can connect Unreal Engine to lights via DMX. And as Unreal Engine changes, the lights on the set change and change how they light the actors. It's a truly extraordinary time. Let me just play a quick video and we'll get into questions. All right, some of the things that we're playing with here right now, these are all experiments. This is Unreal Engine car configurator available in the marketplace. And we are talking to potential car companies about what if rather than doing a real car in the background, we got photorealistic models of the cars and have them change in real time. These are some virtual set things that we're playing with. Constantly trying to see how fast can we change a set. This is some test footage here as we're trying to really break the tracking system. This is our partner AR wall. That is an LED screen. And they're doing tracking on the camera to make it feel like that's a much larger world out there. All right, final guidelines. And this is so important when you're just getting started in production. Whatever the gear is you have, whether it's a cell phone and a blue wall or a green wall, that's your set. Number two, look for the free solution first. As students, you have for the next 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years, you have access to student discounts that make it possible for you to do something you won't be able to do again for 10 years. Number three, modify your script to fit your budget. If you have $100, buy an HDMI cable that you can connect to the TV, that's your virtual production. Modify your set to fit your technology. If all you have is a dorm room and a TV in your dorm room and you want to do a little bit of virtual, great. That's where your story takes place. The number one thing that you have to realize if you're going to do it live, if you're going to do your show live, a Twitch show, whatever it is, you want to do rehearsal. This is where people in the drama department who are used to stage shows are your best friends because they know about rehearsal. And Shayna, you may smile about this. We always hear fix it in post. When you get into virtual production and live, our motto is fix it in pre or fix it in pre-production. And then for those of you who want to know where to go to learn more, it's as easy as these incredibly free resources. Over the last even 3 months, Unreal Engine has got a lot better about this. www.unrealengine.com/learn. If you just want to learn about Unreal Engine, take their Unreal Engine in an hour course. You can have fun with it. It gives you little credits as you progress through, and there are hundreds of hours in there. And then if you want to learn about virtual production, /virtual-production. And I will tell you, if you took a weekend and you did 8 hours on Saturday and 8 hours on Sunday, you at the end of that would know more than 95% of people in Hollywood right now, because this is so new. Leaving you with this, study time is your superpower. And that may sound really annoying and reductive, and you idiot, Stephen, don't call study time a superpower. I will tell you from the perspective of everyone here who's got 12-hour stage days and we're scrambling to make things work, the fact that in between classes, you can do a 4-hour block and you can take that time to learn. I call that a superpower because it's something that nobody in Hollywood has access to right now. During your next 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more years in school, that is your superpower. That gives you access to learning and capabilities that nobody in the industry can match right now. And in essence, it's the gift of flexibility. So that was my promise on you having a superpower. If you want to know more about Butcherbird Studios or reach out, Butcherbird Studios is our Facebook page, The Butcherbirds on Twitter, and info@butcherbirdstudios.com if you want to reach out and get connected. And I want to stop sharing at that point and open it up as promised to questions. I do not need to stop at 6 exactly. So if we want to take a little bit more time for questions, Shayna, I won't speak for your schedule, but do know that we do have more time. So that is virtual production live and some tips and tricks. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I'll get us going with a question just to open it up. My question for you is, how would you say that working with virtual production has changed the nature of collaboration for you? Clearly you've worked in the traditional model. How have things changed on set?
So one of the most exciting things about virtual production is that we have opened up to working with many, many individuals off-site. That was true already in the pandemic. But if you took an average virtual production for us, we have off-site engineers, which are coming from different countries in the world, who can tap into our systems and help us out from an engineering standpoint. We collaborate with artists who all over who can actually update scenes. We load them in, we get client feedback, or a director like me or a writer like me gives feedback, and then they get modified. There has never been a time in Hollywood where more people are dispersed to more places to achieve a given vision. I think the number one thing is, 5 years ago, Milton, I would have thought of post-production as the time where we would go out to different countries in the world to work with different artists to all tell the same story. Now we're doing all of that work before we start rolling camera, because in virtual production, all of that CG work has to be done before we begin filming our main scenes. So that's probably the number one change with virtual, is the point in the process, which is where you started. There was a defined process we always used for the last 100 years. Now everything's turned on its head, because what used to be the end of the process is now moved to the beginning of the process. So that's a little bit of a 360 answer to your question.
Thank you for that. I see Jacob's got his hand raised, so you're up, buddy.
Thank you. Hello. Quick question.
Hey, Jacob. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you. That was very informative and very interesting. I'm just curious, where a compositor who is, traditionally working as a compositor does now, or at least someone who's not working with virtual, how's the job going to change, or what's going to be expected of them, and also a CG, person like modeler or generalist or something. How's their job maybe going to change, or what's going to be expected of them in the future?
Fantastic question, Jacob. I think that the short answer is there have never been as many opportunities for VFX artists in general as are exploding right now. It may not be that your main destination is ILM, like it would have been 10 years ago if you wanted to work at the best CG house or Weta or one of 100 other places. But the number of people who are now requiring CG work as part of their commercial, television, games, teaching environments, etc., with Unreal Engine collaborated, compositors are still needed all the way through that process, even if there's real-time green screen. At the very least, you have to build environments where everything works with everything else. And compositors understand lighting and how objects fit together in a way that other people without those skills don't. I would encourage somebody not to go in with just being a compositor or just being roto or just being a creature animator. I think that we are going to see a time where there's a lot less specialization and a lot more overlap, which should be exciting for artists out there. So if you're learning packages, if you're learning Houdini, or if you're learning Blender, or if you're learning Maya, there's room for all of that still. And frankly, it's like, if you want to be a writer, you should pick one good program and get used to it, but it's going to give you the skills you need to apply to everything else. Or an editor, if you learn Premiere, you're going to be fine on Avid. I think it's the same way in general for VFX artists. You're learning general way of looking at the world and general skills, which are going to be applicable in a lot of areas. But I will leave you with this little thought, Jacob, and that is that you may be preparing for something as a profession, as a specific application that doesn't exist yet. It may simply not exist yet. If you think about Meta and the big metaverse announcements over the last couple of weeks, there may be ways of creating and world building that aren't even described yet, which you could be perfect for as a compositor. Maybe it's about how do you overlay AR objects on top of the real world. And it was true when I was in school, in your position, that the things that I was training for didn't exist yet. And the same is true for you. Many of you will have jobs that don't exist even in the imagination right now. And that's really exciting.
Cool. Thank you very much. That answered my question.
Okay, Brad, go for it.
Hey, also thank you. That was a great presentation. I assume that you're highly dependent on video card for real time. So I'm imagining that that is a critical part of your hardware pipeline. How is the semiconductor shortage affecting you guys? How are you managing that and mitigating that? And do you foresee any relief anytime soon?
I think that anybody who relies on cutting edge technology has to have backup plans right now. And I don't think we'll be out of that. This is my crystal ball, which is just as good as anybody else's. I don't think we'll see supply shortages catch up for another year or so.
Yeah.
We worked with our clients to budget where we would say, hey, listen, to get a 3090 card right now, we're gonna have to pay twice manufacturers just to get access to it. So we were able to answer it with budget that we had to go into well ahead of time. And I will say in general, getting ahead of it communications wise for clients has been key for us. And then working hand in hand and saying, hey, let's amortize this across productions, for instance.
Cool. Thanks.
Elizabeth.
Hi, so I was wondering for in general, like if someone who's wanting to go in this field, would it be better to focus on something like VFX or game design, or is it just any way to get familiar with CG?
I want to answer this in two different ways. Elizabeth, what are you good at?
Currently, I'm a graphic design major, but I am wanting to go into VFX.
Are you good at graphic design? Are you a good artist?
I'd say, yeah.
So from my perspective, you want to really focus on what you're good at, right? So everything stems from that. You've already, if you're an artist, you literally can do something that other people cannot do. If you ask me to draw a sketch of you, you would say, this looks like my pet, not me. I mean, I would be so far off, or this looks like a pile of garbage and not me. That's how little drawing ability I have as a graphic artist, right? So you've got to stem from that, and you've got to say, okay, I'm a graphic artist first, and what is going to be most analogous to this? Well, I would say you want to get into character design in CG, and you want to get into modeling in CG, and you want to get into paint. If you're interested in the graphics or in the visual effects world, you got to start there, because that's going to give you your edge. And the better you get at it, the more praise you're going to get, and the deeper you go in it. So I would say become the best, most well-versed artist you can be. If you're a graphic artist, make sure to double down on painting and how the old masters achieved the lighting effects that they did. And I would say, make sure you understand sculpture and how sculpture is done in the real world. When Weta first started, they really broke some ground in that they brought in actual physical sculptors to become CG modelers, because physical sculptors understood shadow and light, and they understood how to give things reality. And when ILM was first starting, they actually turned to painters and to artists who understood how you could layer paint to make effects work. And so that was a long-winded way of saying, start with what you're good at, and then that will fuel your passion. Does that sound like it fits with what you were thinking, Elizabeth, or is that a shock and you're like, no, that's wrong?
It definitely makes sense.
Cool. You often hear pursue your passion, and I agree, but I think you want to moderate that with, what are you better at than your colleagues? And I think you want to build on that, right? You can become passionate about it, you can overlap, but you really want to ask, what are your actual superpowers? That's my advice.
Cole, you're up.
Great. Hello. Sorry.
Hi, Cole.
Hello. Thank you so much first off for your presentation. It was really insightful, informative for someone who has viewed Twitch, The Mandalorian, the behind the scenes, but hasn't actually talked to someone in VP. So kind of my question is, what do you think right now is the biggest challenge to virtual production, and how are you and your company working to tackle that challenge to turn it into a future strength?
You will often hear in production that we need hardened solutions. It's funny, you'll often hear soldiers talking about technology in the field and what they rely on it for, and people in film production who are staring down the barrel of their 5th 12-hour day in a row, and they've got to deliver this no matter what. We have to work with things that are utterly reliable. Virtual production is not utterly reliable right now. Virtual production can be a nightmare where things go wrong in ways that you don't know why it's going wrong. And all of a sudden something's crashed out and you have to find the gremlin, and you're about to go live in 2 minutes. And there's a reason that that director over there lost half his hair. And in a word, that's stability. Virtual production has to become rock hard and stable before more big productions adopt it. But this is also good news, because, Cole, that kind of playful, tinkering, experimental space, you should not be afraid of. You should feel great about breaking things and having it fall apart, and then learning how to fix it and install the patch and connect it to the camera that nobody's connected it to before, because every time you fix that, you're going to become even more essential if that's something you want to bring to Hollywood, for instance, because that's all in this idea of keeping things stable and dependable. So maybe a different perspective that you were thinking. So stability.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're up, Jason.
Hey, Stephen. Thank you so much. This was a really cool talk.
Cool. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. So I am studying a lot of like post-production and, VFX and things like that. And
Great.
I was wondering, how do you decide whether virtual production is the way to go with something as opposed to green screen?
So there's a dichotomy you offer there that may not be the dichotomy. So virtual production in this case is, are you doing something which you can record in real time? So some of that is about what is your deadline? If you're going to do it live, you have to do it virtual production if you're going to involve green screen in some way, just because it has to be delivered right then. But even if it's not live, if you adopt a virtual production / final pixels mentality, you might be shooting a single camera on a green screen. 5 years ago, somebody like me in an independent studio would have said, okay, I'm going to have to figure out how to composite everything in post. But you make so many mistakes that way. You make so many mistakes because you don't know exactly what's going to be on that green screen. And we're finding that if you are maybe 80% of the way there, maybe it's not quite photorealistic yet, even by having something that is accurate to the scene you're shooting, two things are going to happen. You're going to react to it as actors because you know what you're acting against and you can see it in playback. You as a director are going to understand what you're giving direction to. And if you're the visual effects artist on set or the head of virtual production, even if it's not 100% final pixels and it's 80% or 50%, you're going to have a more honest filmmaking experience. So in general, we're finding that if you at least do that, you're still going to save money in the back end. So it would be a simple answer to say, hey, if I can't afford the virtual production technology, I'm just going to do it in post. But are you really saving all the money you think you might be if you just did a simple lower res version of it? And Shayna would have her own perspective on this as a visual effects maven herself. But what we're seeing, and this is very cutting edge of the last 2 years, near term effects or near real or edge real time. It's close enough to make sure you're on the right track, but maybe isn't final. That's a thing now.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
I think we have time for one more. If anyone's got one last question. Going once, twice. All right, Professor Strong and Professor Harper. Who wants to go first?
I'll just ask, I'm just curious, if you were back in school, Stephen, what would you be studying? What would you study if you were back where all these guys are?
I love that question. I wish I were back in school right now on a regular basis, because this has been a time where there has been an explosion. I would, even if I weren't taking the class, I would take a look at anything I was interested in Unreal, and I would actually say, okay, I want to actually make my own special credit, or here's an idea for everybody. Most schools that I know of allow you to create your own course. If I were in school right now, and I don't think you'd probably be able to do this until you were a junior or senior, I would actually outline a semester course where I would give 3 hours a week of the actual tutorials and things that are laid out on Unreal. And I would map a course out over the course of 12 or 15 or whatever your credit is. And I would list the courses I was going to take, and I would list how I would evaluate myself. And that would be my course. And guess what? That one course would put you in the top 1% of graduates coming into Hollywood right now, because you would know and think about Unreal Engine in a certain way. So I guess, Professor Strong, I would design my own course on virtual right now for myself. And I would get a advisor like Shayna or Milton who could kind of course correct. But frankly, you'd be teaching them or me as much as anything in that case. Like, that would be a really plum mentor position, because you'd be teaching both ways at that point.
That's great. Thank you.
And Professor Harper.
Bruce, you read my mind. Thank you, Stephen, so much for that. Was really, really informative. I think this stuff is so exciting. Coming from graphic design and kind of a photo background, this stuff really has me interested. And I teach a little bit of virtual reality stuff. So we're really trying to think about what kind of skill sets we want to have. So I think the answer you gave, Bruce, is really informative. And I think it's just such an exciting time for everybody. I love the unknown. You know, I mean, it's intimidating. The older I get, I'm like, do I like the unknown? I don't know. But my heart is very excited by a mystery and what's coming down the road.
Hard agree, Professor Harper. And I would expand on that as an end note here. The unknown, another word for that is opportunity.
Mhm.
The beginning of film, nobody knew what the possibilities were when you put the camera down and filmed a train coming at you. When sound first came on, nobody knew how far you could take sound. Every time the unknown comes into the industry, and this is coming across games, television, film, etc., that is an opportunity. It's an extraordinary opportunity. So the point at where you're graduating right now, you have a chance to make a name for yourself faster and more expansively than any other time over the last 2 decades. So just a little bit of a perspective from somebody who's on the ground right now, right out here in Hollywood.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
So before most of you came on, Steve and myself and Shayna were talking about Butcherbird and whether or not Butcherbird takes on interns. Some of you might find yourself in LA off on your own or through SULA. And so to that question, Steven says,
absolutely. We're looking for passionate self-starters who want to learn and give as good as they get. So if you want to get in touch with me, talk to Milton or Shayna. And I'd love to know if you're going to be a semester out here. I'll tell this to all of you who are still on the call. I'd love to know what you think in virtual. I'd love to know what you come up with next, because we're all learning right now. So definitely keep me in mind as you want to share what you found or come up with or how you broke something, because that's also informative.
well, thank you, Steven, for lending us your experiences and your time. I think it was like everything I hoped that it would be. Thank you so much.
A pleasure and an honor. Have a wonderful night, folks, and looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Bye now.